think it's rather ironic that they would do this and to argue that we had this much influence, because it is to me pretty amazing that they'd even make this charge. But they blamed a lot of people, and a lot of people that were involved. And I think that sour grapes, I think it's why don't we kill the messenger, and they picked out a whole lot of people and put them in the same category. But to tell you the truth, I'm very concerned about fake news stories, and I have been. That's what my Liberty Report is all about, is trying to sort out the truth. But I think where really the fake stories come from, the fake news comes from our own government, when they tell us about why we have to go to war and do these different things in our economic reports. And that's probably what was the big issue of the campaign. That's probably why Trump did so well, is because they've lost confidence in the government. But it's also ironic that they put me in the category and say, well, you were following Russian orders, and you were saying these things, which would help Trump and hurt Hillary. It just turns out that I wasn't a supporter of Trump's. You know, I had a pretty neutral position on it. But anyway, we got painted with it. But I don't think there's any significant downfall of this. I think that it helps us get the story out, because the whole report that they put out in the Post is fake news again.
Well, it is, but it is a fact that in the debates, Vladimir Putin, Russian propaganda, accusations of the hacking was certainly purported in a big way by Hillary Clinton and the Clinton campaign constantly. Do you think that and they couldn't substantiate any of it, and there was no actual proof of any of that, and the accusations of RT supporting Donald Trump? I write all of the political news in our newscast at 8 o'clock, and I feel like I was more than fair with no interference whatsoever. I covered the campaign and what people were saying and what it meant, and brought people on to give their take on it. But this constant narrative that the Clintons continue to come up with about Russia, what was your reaction when you constantly kept hearing that?
Well, I thought it was just politics as usual, but it is a bit ironic that they're more guilty than the rest, certainly on your side or our side, of producing news and talking about this. So, yes, it happens. I don't think that everybody's immune from not stretching things, but this was a big stretch. They were guilty of not clarifying and putting out these stories. And I know a lot of people did say, oh, you know, Trump isn't as harsh with Russia. It must be true. You know, they use that kind of argument. But the ones who are charging us with listening to what Russia tells us to say, I think they've lost all credibility. People look at that and say, same old stuff again, especially when they look a little bit deeper in how they did things much worse than they're even pretending or accusing us have done. But they're looking for scapegoats, and they're looking to try to destroy the messenger, and that was one of the goals in our particular website, especially in foreign policy, is to sort out the truth from the fiction, because there's a lot of falsehoods that go out there. And I have, you know, for many, many years tried very hard to keep our government from getting engaged in foreign entanglements overseas. So that just falls in line with what I believe in.
Dr. Paul, what would be your advice to both Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump with the backdrop of all this propaganda accusation and fake news environment, in a sense? What would be your advice to both of these gentlemen to better relations between the two countries?
Well, the most important thing is to believe in and practice diplomacy, and that was one of my gripes in the presidential campaign. We have a lot of diplomats, but we don't practice diplomacy very well. And they maybe just could look at our history of Kennedy and Khrushchev. I was drafted during that period of time, and it was a serious confrontation over Cuba, ironically. And yet Kennedy called Khrushchev, and they talked, and they came up with a settlement. And the way I understand history, they actually ended up respecting each other afterward. I don't think these problems that we have today are anything like we were facing in the early 1960s. So I think it'd be very easy for both of them to initiate just conversation, you know, and unfortunately our policies over the years has been to avoid the conversations, and then we get into trouble, and before you know it, it gets out of hand and the demagogues join in, and then they say who's lying and who's telling the truth and arguing. But I think the two of them certainly could do some talking and making it public and known exactly where they stand on the issues.
Dr. Ron Paul, a pleasure. Good to have you with us tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. I appreciate your time.